Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I am back with another what I eat in a day. Now, I have to be honest, this was actually over 2 separate days, but I had the footage. I wanted to share it with you guys, and today we're going to be doing a lot of carb loading. So I hope you're prepared. There are some veggies in these meals, but I literally finally made bread by hand, and spoiler alert, it was delicious, although I did overcook it a little bit, but it was good. And I made some other carb-tastic meals. So with that being said, let's hop right in. So the first recipe I'm going to show you is veggie pasta, and these are the noodles that I used. I picked them up at our local turnip truck, and when I heated up the water to cook the pasta, I threw these Brussels sprouts and chopped white sweet onions, covered in olive oil and garlic, salt, and pepper, and then I threw them in the oven at around 425 degrees for 40 minutes. And so while those were cooking, I started to create the sauce that was going to be mixed in with my pasta. So I heated up some white sweet onions, some white mushrooms, and then I just cooked those up. By the way, I used avocado oil to stir fry these veggies. After they had a chance to cook a little bit, I threw some of my fresh crushed garlic into the mix. I like to put my garlic in a little bit later because I feel like it gets kind of burnt tasting otherwise. Then I threw in a dash of red wine because red wine and mushrooms were made to go together. Oh, the smell of all of this cooking, the red wine, the onions, the garlic, the mushrooms, it's just heavenly. So tonight I decided to use this Rouse homemade arrabbiata sauce. One day I will master pasta sauce, fingers crossed, but because of convenience and also I just like the taste, I used this sauce and I dumped it in, and then I always use the trick of adding some water to my pasta jars to get every last ounce of pasta sauce out of the jar. Then I stirred everything together and let it simmer for a little bit while Bowser hung out with me in the kitchen, looked cute as ever. He always is like right nearby when I'm cooking, always hoping for scraps. So once my pasta was done, I pulled it out of the water and then I dumped it into the pasta sauce. Then I stirred everything around and really tried to coat all of the noodles with the sauce. I felt like there wasn't enough sauce in there because we really like our pastas saucy, so I added some of this Muir Glen organic roasted garlic sauce to the mix, and I put the rest in the fridge, and then I just continued to stir everything and let it simmer. Then I grated some Parmesan cheese and added that to the mix, and I also chopped up a ball of mozzarella that I had and added that to the pasta. I don't even know if I've ever cooked with mozzarella until this meal, but it was really good, and yeah. Then I added some chunky sea salt and some fresh ground black pepper at your guys' suggestion, by the way, and then I stirred it all together. And you can probably tell by looking at this up close, it was so good. Ugh, just delicious. So then I pulled my Brussels sprouts out of the oven and I dumped them into a bowl. And then I poured a sauce that was inspired by a Pioneer Woman recipe that basically consists of garlic mustard aioli, olive oil, balsamic vinaigrette, some honey, salt, and pepper, and I tossed the dressing into the Brussels sprouts and onions. And I didn't get a final shot of everything, but I guess you can just trust me that it was good. So moving on to the next recipe. This is actually a HelloFresh inspired recipe. I had never made couscous till this box came to my door, and Dan loves this recipe now. So I started off by putting my veggies on a sheet pan, and the veggies were zucchini, white onions, more white mushrooms, some cherry tomatoes, and then I drizzled some olive oil on top. And then I added some garlic salt, as well as some pepper. And then I just massaged the veggies and the oil and the salt and pepper all together. Then I threw my veggies in the oven. I want to say around 350 for like 25-30 minutes. My cooking is so vague, guys. So then I made a veggie broth using these veggie bouillon cubes, and all you do is just heat up some water and throw the cubes in. I am working on making my own veggie stock from scratch using frozen vegetable scraps, but I haven't gotten around to it quite yet. So then I threw some Kerrygold grass-fed butter into a pan with some garlic, which I know this is exactly opposite of what I said last time. We're just gonna roll with it. And even though this seems back to back, it had actually been about 10 minutes. And so while the pan heated up, I pulled my veggies out of the oven and I just kind of stirred them up and flipped some veggies over just to try to get them more thoroughly cooked all the way around. So once the butter and garlic had started to heat, I threw my Israeli couscous into the pan just to let it get kind of crackly and toasted. And after that got a chance to toast for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, I poured all of my veggie stock into the couscous. Then I added in some green onions, not nearly enough, but this was all I had. Long story, I do need to give updates about my green onions that I'm growing at my house. I will do that in a day in my life video at some point. But then I cracked in some pepper, added some pink Himalayan sea salt, and then just continued to stir everything up. By the way, I will link this spoon in the info box because I get so many questions about it all the time. Actually, everything in my videos pretty much that is linkable is linked in my info box, separated by different rooms in my house. So if any of you are ever curious about where I get something, check the info box because more than likely it's linked there. Then I added some red chili flakes, and then just because I've now been obsessed with balsamic vinaigrette due to you guys, I added a splash of it to the mix as well. So at this point, my veggies were out of the oven, and once the couscous started to feel soft and my veggies were out, I poured my Veggie Medley into the couscous and stirred it all together. Apparently this is carb and cheese day today. So I took some feta that I chopped up and I threw it into the mix as well. And then I squeezed a bunch of lemon juice into the pan. I even went back in with more lemon juice because is there such a thing as too much lemon juice? I'm gonna say no, even though most people would probably say yes. Then I threw in some little baby chives that I had cut from my tower garden. Next up, I served my couscous into a bowl, and then earlier that day I had made a bunch of kale salad using kale from my tower garden, and I had quite a bit left over from my breakfast, so I scooped a bunch of that onto the couscous just to give it that fresh crunch, and oh my gosh, it was so delicious. I can't even explain how much I am living for kale slaw again, and I keep putting it on everything like this, and it's so good. All right, and now it's time for the moment everyone has been waiting for, and that is bread making. I decided to make my own bread by hand. You guys know that I've been doing it lately in a bread machine, and I do want to figure out how to properly work the bread machine because I know other people who say that their breads come out light and fluffy. Mine have not yet, so hashtag pray for Nikki. But today, Dan and I decided to work together on this project of making handmade bread. So we put all of the ingredients that were called for. I will put the recipe that I used in the info box, by the way. And once we put everything in and let our mixer run, we began to add flour slowly. This is one of the steps that this recipe called for, was slowly adding the flour to the mixture. So that is what we did, or should I say what Dan did. Dan likes to join me sometimes with cooking because, to those of you who don't know, Dan loves to cook, and so we will tag team projects like this fairly regularly. So once the dough was mixed, he used his hands to separate it from the sides of the bowl and then added flour to the dough all the way around to keep it separate from the bowl. Then I took a tea towel and I covered it, I believe for about an hour. But side note, like 2 minutes in, we realized we forgot to add the rosemary. So we actually took it out of the covering and put it back in the bowl and added rosemary. Then I put the towel back on and let it sit for an hour. And then after an hour, it had doubled in size, maybe even quadrupled. And so at this point, Dan took it out of the bowl. The dough kind of fell apart. And then he spent a couple of minutes reshaping the bread, just gently so he didn't remove too many of the air bubbles that we wanted to keep inside. Then he sprinkled it with some more flour. And then he put it in something called a proofing basket. And then we covered it and allowed it to sit for, I believe, another half hour. So while it was sitting, Dan pulled out our Dutch oven and put it in the oven to heat for the following half hour at like 425 or something like that. You can check the recipe. After the timer went out, he pulled the Dutch oven out, and he actually learned this hack recently of placing the bread on the lid of the Dutch oven rather than in the bowl. It makes the whole process much easier. So he set it down on top of some flour, and then he actually cut this shape into the bread to make it into its own beautiful piece of art. Then he put the bowl on top like a lid, allowed it to bake. Then he pulled it out, took off the lid so that it could get some air, and then put it back in the oven to allow the crust to bake just a little bit more. Then he pulled it out when we felt like the bread was complete. We actually definitely overcooked it a little bit, but not too much, and it was still delicious. So we allowed it to cool on the cooling rack for a little while. And once we felt like the bread had cooled down, we decided to cut into it to show you the inside. We actually both had toast right away. And oh my gosh, it was so good. Next time, we will definitely be cooking it in the last little increment, just a little shorter so it doesn't get those burnt edges. But overall, this bread was delicious and definitely easier than I thought. So yeah, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Hopefully this inspired you to go experiment and cook some fun carbs and veggies in your kitchen. By the way, 2 things. 1, if you didn't see my last video, it was actually a music video, and so many people's hearts and souls went into that video. And I just wanted to say thank you all for all of your feedback and love on that, because yeah, like I said, so many people poured their hearts into it. And second off, if you made it this far, per the usual, go to my info box. I say per the usual because I've been doing these a lot lately, and check out my secret / not so secret giveaway that I'm doing, just to say thank you for all of your support. I will hopefully see you guys back here soon with another new video. All right, bye guys.